What is up, guys? Welcome to the Keep It Hoop podcast. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or Spreaker, welcome. And if you're watching or listening to this on YouTube, please remember to like, subscribe, share, and comment. It would mean a lot. Today, I wanted to talk about the All-Star starters that were revealed on Wednesday, as well as just going over some of the games we've had recently, and also just taking a look ahead to what we have today and tomorrow for the weekend. So let's look at the All-Star team, right? The Western Conference, you have Luka Doncic, Stephen Curry, LeBron James, Nikola Jokic, Kawhi Leonard. And for the Eastern Conference, you have Kyrie Irving, Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Joel Embiid. Now, the first thing that I thought of, right, the one thing that really stuck out was, where the hell is Damian Lillard? And I'm taking Luka off if I had the decision. And I think that's the call most people would make. And this is nothing against Luka. Luka's a fantastic player. I'm a fan. Seems like a great guy, a great teammate. He's done no wrong. But we got to just reward Dame, man. And we got to reward the winning. And look, I get Luka's counting numbers look really good, right? He's averaging 29 points, 9 assists, almost 9 rebounds, a steal, and almost a block a game. Really good numbers. I understand that. But Damian Lillard having a really good season as well, averaging almost 30, almost 8 assists, 4 rebounds, a steal. And I think you just have to reward winning, right? Because, again, Luka's numbers look really good, but his team isn't even 500. And Dame's team, 18-10, 4th place in the West, sitting only 2.5 games behind the Clippers and only 3 games behind the Lakers. 2 teams who were looked at as possible championship favorites, right? So I think my problem with it was that all I need is consistency. And I need consistency. That's all I ask for in a lot of things, right? It could be just the way you act. Could be voting in a thing like this, or it could be referees officiating a game, but I just need consistency. Because last year, Bradley Beal didn't make the All-Star game, and a lot of people said, well, he wasn't winning. But then this year, they vote both Bradley Beal and Luka Doncic in and reward them, even though neither of those teams are even 500. Now, what Damian Lillard has done without CJ McCollum, without Nurkic, is insane. And I think a lot of people will argue that he's in the MVP conversation. And my biggest gripe with this is the fact that Damian Lillard would have been a starter if it was just the coaches and the media. And I get the coaches and the media make the wrong decision at times, and they get things wrong as well. But if it was just up to them, the numbers, show that Damian Lillard would have been a starter. And it was ultimately the fans that got Luka Doncic into the starting lineup. And I've always had a weird relationship / problem with this, because I get the NBA All-Star Game and really All-Star Game for a lot of the other sports as well, but it's a fan event. It's a fan-driven event. They look for fan engagement, which is the phrase that Adam Silver and even David Stern used to use a lot. And I get that. It's a fan-driven event, but it's unfortunate because things like players' contracts and their bonuses, as well as sometimes players and their rankings or arguments about how good a player is, can be tied to All-Star Game appearances or starts. And, when we're placing an emphasis, not even a heavy emphasis, but when we are weighing a certain amount of importance to All-Star appearances in things of that nature, again, contracts and things like legacy and player rankings, then it's weird to ultimately have the All-Star Game be such a popularity contest at the same time, right? Because if you're doing that, then the best players don't always get chosen. And it's also difficult because you're trying to take 30 players out of the insane amount of talented players in the NBA. Like, there's almost always going to be a player or two that you can argue to be an all-star, and that just doesn't get in. But some years there are really bad snubs, and I just wish there was, and I know this is never really going to happen unless things change vastly, but I just wish there was more of a guideline as to what an all-star is. And I know it depends on the person, and as we've seen over the last 2 years, and the disparity between the what's important, but some people place a value on just counting stats and how good you are individually, and then some people like myself would like to place a greater value, and not all of it, but on winning. But I think that it's a fine line, right? Because I don't want a situation where it's like the Atlanta Hawks from 2015 when Jeff Teague, Kyle Korver, Al Horford, and Paul Millsap all made the All-Star game. And I'm not going to call out names, but that team shouldn't have had 4 All-Stars. I'm going to just say that much. I'm just going to say that much. And look, I was a fan of that Atlanta team. I thought they played really well together. I thought they played good basketball. Mike Budenholzer really just showcased his coaching abilities as well as just getting the most out of his players. But that team didn't have 4 All-Stars, right? So I don't want it to be like, oh, well, if a team is winning, then we should just reward everybody on that team. I don't think that's the case. Obviously, there needs to be a certain level of individual excellence, and you have to be putting up pretty impressive numbers as well. But at the end of the day, again, I just want consistency, because you can tell from last year to this year, very different kind of criteria. And I just want consistency, not only for myself as a fan and as someone who likes breaking down the game, but also for the players. Because I can imagine, look, these players aren't going to come out and be like, oh man, I need to make the All-Star game. But in the back of their minds, like, everybody wants to be considered an All-Star. And regardless of how they feel about this year's All-Star game and wanting to participate in it or not, right? Being an All-Star is still such an honor for a lot of these players. And I'm sure it's frustrating for guys who end up getting snubbed from year to year, being on that outside. And even if you're, again, end up making the All-Star game, but you don't make it as a starter, I'm sure it is frustrating at times at the lack of consistency that people are kind of voting on. And there's another problem that is pretty hard to fix. And look, the NBA is a very, very global game at this point. And we are now privileged enough to have a lot of great players from all around the world. But sometimes when an international player is very good, they tend to get an insane amount of boost in votes from whatever country they're from. And props to them. Those are great fans rooting and voting for their guy. And a lot of times those are really good guys, right? Like Giannis and Luka are guys who are very good and deserving of All-Star game starts in most years. And I think this year was just a case where I would have picked Damian Lillard over Luka. But it's now a situation where, like, I look back and it's not even just the international players, but just players with a huge, huge following and fandom, right? And whether that's because of the country they're from or their play style or their legacy. But I remember when I was growing up and watching the NBA, and I used to vote myself, right? I used to vote. I used to fill in those ballots and actually fill them in at either NBA games, because they used to have ballots that you can fill in and put in, or I would mail them in. And I've done online voting as well. And I know a lot of it is now just done on things like Twitter as well. But I remember getting to see those results, a few weeks before the All-Star game, and seeing Yao Ming in years when he wasn't even playing. And that was that was really what told me or showed me this fan voting is never going to be fully great, right? There's always going to be flaws. And then you had guys like Dwayne Wade and Kobe who made it in years they weren't playing great at all. They were playing pretty bad, and they would still make it. And I get, again, it's a fan engagement driven game or weekend even, right? The whole thing is for the fans. But it's, again, when you have so much of the contract bonuses and things like just arguments on who's better and who's greater, some of that relies on All-Star game appearances and stuff like that. It's annoying that it's a popularity contest at the end of the day, right? And I get it, but if that's what it is, then I think more people need to acknowledge that it is a popularity contest. Now, for the most part, the All-Star game does what it needs to do, right? It gets the best players in the game, but there's still, I think there could be a better system, and I think the only solution is to continue to decrease the number of fan votes, or the decrease the percentage that the fan votes end up weighing in for, because again, the media guys and the coaches do make decisions that are questionable at times, but they are guys who are still guys I trust more with these kind of stuff than the fans, because fans, while a lot of fans out there know a lot about basketball and aren't biased, there are still a lot of fans who are very biased or just trolls. I know Alex Caruso ended up getting a lot of votes. Robin Lopez. I'm a Robin Lopez fan, man. I liked Robin Lopez when he was on Portland. Fan of him when he came to New York. I root for him now in Washington. But I think he got 2 votes. And if you voted for Robin Lopez, you deserve to never vote in an All-Star game again, right? So I get those 2 votes don't do anything, but the 2 votes that went to Robin Lopez, and then I'm sure there's guys like, I don't know, there's random guys around the league who got random votes, I'm sure like Elfrid Payton probably got like 1,000 votes, and guys like, I don't know, who's another random guy, Bryn Forbes probably got like 12 votes, right? All these votes are going to add up. So I just wish that the fan voting probably just weighed less, and again, I get that it's a fan-driven game, but it's just like, some of it's just so... It just makes me want to cringe, man, when I see things like that, and it is disappointing. And for the East, again, Bradley Beal, I think, is having a spectacular season, and I'm a fan of Bradley Beal. I have him on my fantasy team. I've always been a fan of him. I like his game, but I don't know. I don't know if you can have a starter in the All-Star game where his team is way below 500. At the Wizards right now are 13th in the East at 9-17, barely above teams like Cleveland and the Pistons, who are really bad right now, but the Wizards with a 34% win rate, right? So like, I don't know if you can have someone on that team be an all-star regardless of how good or bad you think the rest of his team is. But you look at who he'd be replaced by, maybe a guy like Jaylen Brown. But yes, I don't know. Yeah, I do have a gripe with the all-star choosings this year, right? The selections for the starters. I think Damian should have made it. He's an MVP candidate, deserves to be a starter. I don't know how you can be a top 3 or 4 MVP candidate right now and not be a starter. Again, it's hard, right? I know the NBA wants to include the fans. You have a lot of things like international votes counting into it, and you just but it is a popularity contest, and if we're not going to change anything, I want more people to recognize that as it is, because as I said, they get it right for the most part, but you do have just questionable decisions here and there. I also wanted to go over some of the reserve selections while we're on this topic. For the East, James Harden, he's going to get in. He's been playing very well with Brooklyn, and I know he got off to a pretty slow and rocky start with Houston, but he's playing some of his best basketball in terms of just overall efficiency and just contributing to team success. And I know he's had his moments in Houston where he had, his MVPs and just the way he would carry that team. But I'm really pleasantly surprised with the way he's been able to kind of just integrate himself into the Brooklyn Nets offense. And I didn't think that there would be too much of a problem, but it looks more natural than I expected. I thought they'd score a lot, but I thought that it would sometimes look sloppy and whatnot. But he's done a really good job of kind of becoming the de facto point guard, and Kyrie even said so, that he's now the point guard of the team, and he looks really good as kind of a distributor. He still is able to score whenever he wants or the team needs him to. Now with KD out, he's showing that he can still give you 35, close to 40 on any given night. And then you have Jaylen Brown, again, should be a lock-in for a reserve. He's really been the rock of that Boston team who struggled. Kemba Walker, we've talked about his struggles. Jason Tatum is, I think, still the A1 alpha on that team, but Jaylen Brown's been a very good A2, and he's been, again, I think he's been more consistent than Jason Tatum, and he's just been super impressive, man. And I'm happy for him, because he's always been kind of just relegated to being a spot-up shooter or a third, fourth option, right? Because they had Kemba, they had Kyrie before that, and then you had Gordon Hayward all these years, and with Kemba missing a lot of time early on in the season and still struggling at times now, he's now been able to really spread his wings and become that player that Danny Ainge and a lot of people saw him coming out of college, and you're just showcasing his full potential, and really happy for him. And then for the backcourt in the East, and it comes down to guys like Trae Young, again, winning or not winning, what do you weigh? I mean, having a pretty solid individual season, so I'm sure he'll get in. And then you look at maybe Ben Simmons or Fred VanVleet possibly. A guy like Zach LaVine, another guy who's been playing really well individually, but his team's outside the playoff picture, under 500. Front court guys, Jason Tatum should be a lock. And then Julius Randle should be a lock. And then it comes down to, I think, Sabonis and Bam. Julius Randle, right, might not get the recognition he deserves because of just the fact that he plays for the Knicks and isn't the household name that Bam is, that Jimmy is. But Jimmy's missed a lot of time, and I don't know. So, like, Charles Barkley has some questionable decisions on TNT on Wednesday or Thursday, man. Like, I think he had Jimmy Butler over Julius Randle. No, he had Jimmy Butler over Jason Tatum. Excuse me. Yeah, he had Jimmy Butler over Jason Tatum, which is ridiculous because I get Jimmy's a good player, and he's actually one of my favorite players in the league. I love his competitiveness. I relate to him as a player and as kind of a leader, and he's funny, really funny guy as well. But Jimmy Butler's missed a lot of time, and that team isn't playing well, even with him back, right? Like, they're 12-17. I don't think you can reward him with an all-star appearance, especially with the lack of games he's played. And, yeah, I mean, Julius Randle, he's averaging more points, rebounds, and assists than Bam. He's having a great season. And his team, the Knicks, my Knicks, have a way better record than Miami. Well, I wouldn't say way better, but still, you know, they are a game and a half above Miami. So I would personally have Julius Randle, Jason Tatum, and Sabonis. I think Sabonis has been impressive as well. And then Gordon Hayward probably won't, but that's a guy that'd be pretty nice to see him get in just because of all the things he went through, the injuries and stuff in Boston. And then we look at the West. So I'm just going to say the first thing that really bugged me about the Western Conference discussion that the TNT crew was having. Charles Barkley had Jordan Clarkson as one of the reserves. Now, Jordan Clarkson is another guy I'm a big fan of. I got nothing against Jordan Clarkson. He's having a very good season. I've talked about and raved about him and his performance and the role he's carved out for himself on this podcast or in our videos before. But he's not an all-star. He is not an all-star. And I get, you know, you want to reward guys, right? But Charles said he wants to reward Jordan Clarkson for the season he's having. And then Kenny said, well, you have to compare them to other guys who would be in the All-Star game or other All-Star caliber players, and not Jordan Clarkson compared to Jordan Clarkson of last year. And that's I mean, I think that's the best argument, right? Again, Jordan Clarkson's having a very good year for Jordan Clarkson standards. But as an All-Star, right, you compare him to guys like Devin Booker, Chris Paul, Donovan Mitchell, now Damian Lillard, who's going to be a reserve, even SGA. I don't think you can even put him close. I don't think it's even arguable. I don't think it's debatable. And I get he's playing for the team with the best record in the league, but he's a sixth man, and his stats just don't rank, just match up. So I don't know. I mean, he said he's having a better season than AD, which AD's having a pretty down year for AD standards, and even then, he's not. Jordan Clarkson just isn't. You look at the front court guys. So we already talked about the backcourt guys, right? Like, I think Dame will get in. I think Mitchell will get in. I think Booker will get in, and then maybe Chris Paul. But then you look at the front court. You have Paul George should get in. I think Zion will get in. He's having a very good season. Shout out to Zion for kind of putting it together, staying healthy, and he's really, over the last month or so, just putting a really dominant stretch together where he's just showing guys what he's everyone thought he could do. And I know last year, obviously, he missed some time, but as of late, he's just been the unstoppable force, the matchup nightmare that we all expected. You put a smaller guy on him, just going to put his head down, outpower him, overpower him. You put a bigger guy on him, he's going to blow past you. And, you know, really just happy to see him healthy and playing this well. And then, again, Paul George having a very good season. He said he was going to be coming into the season angry and motivated, and he's shown that. Slowed down a little bit. Has been out the lineup a little bit, but especially to start the season, I mean, he was just playing insane basketball. And then Anthony Davis might still get in, kind of off of a reputation thing. But yeah, so just, again, overall gripe with the All-Star system. You know, it's a little bit of a flawed system, but it is what it is. You know, I'm still usually excited for now. This year, I don't really know how to feel about it. I think I kind of hope that it wasn't happening. I don't think it's the best idea to go out there and bring the best players in the world in a environment where they're going to be traveling, and then you have to put them back into their team environments, and you're putting the players, the coaches, and everybody who's going to be attending and involved in this game at risk. And I know the NBA continues to label it as kind of a fan appreciation event, but at the end of the day, like it's a business, and I know a lot of why they're doing this is for the sponsors and the money, right? And they're not going to say that, obviously, and it is what it is. But you have all these players who have kind of already voiced that they don't want to be playing, and hopefully we just get a good game, because last year the new system proved to be really good, right? It was one of the best All-Star games I've ever seen, and it was unfortunate that it ended with a free throw, but the new system was really good, and I hope it's not a one-off thing, because I know a lot of players played their heart out for the Kobe tribute and in honor of him. But yeah, hopefully if it's going to continue to go on, then hopefully it's a good game. But I am a little bit worried because of just the one, you look at the reputation, right? And it's not the best look. We are still in the middle of a pandemic, and it's not the best idea to go out there and do this when it's not a necessary game. Like, it's one thing to play a regular season game, but to have an exhibition game where you're bringing in the best players from all around the country and putting them in and then pushing them back into their team environment, I think it's just a bit dangerous. It's a little bit unfortunate, because I do think the NBA handled the bubble really well. It was a huge success, and I think they really laid the outline for how to handle a situation like that. I think they handled it the best out of any professional sports league, but it seems to be a go, so we just keep our fingers crossed and just hope for the best, right? So let's look at some of the games that we've had since Wednesday, right? Because that was when we had our last podcast. The game I wanted to talk about the most, or at least first, was the Bucks Raptors game that we had on Wednesday, I believe. And the Raptors beat the Bucks, and big win for the Raptors, because again, they got off to a slow start, but they've been picking it up recently. So props to them. And I know there's rumors of them maybe picking up a guy like Drummond, so we'll see how that goes. It'll be a big pickup for them. I know Drummond isn't the franchise-changing superstar, but still provides them with some interior presence. Something that they miss after Serge and Marc Gasol left them, right? But the Bucks just continue to be disappointing, man. And I know they picked up a win against OKC last night, but their offense is still decent. I think it's a top 10 offense, but their offense still, I feel like it could be better, especially when you have the talent that they have at the top three. And I know Jrue Holiday and Chris Middleton aren't the most prolific ISO scorers where you give them the ball and say, all right, get me 30, but still very solid offensive players. And then you have Giannis, and then you have a really good, smart coach in Budenholzer, but a lot of it just is pick and pop with Giannis and Brook at the top of the key, or maybe Giannis and Chris, or maybe Jrue and Giannis. But it's like I think you could do way more and be creative with a guy like Giannis. Let him catch the ball at the mid post more often, or have him post up, and it doesn't mean turn him into a traditional post up big, but if you can get him the ball closer, then defenses are going to have a harder time stopping him and clogging the paint. And you put him in a face-up situation, I think he could really excel off of that. But a lot of it is just their defense. Their defense has been super disappointing this year. Budenholzer's been someone who's always prided himself and his team on defense, and this Bucks team has been good defensively over the last few years. And we talked about how they've really missed some size coming off their bench at the guard position. Their two guards now, even especially with Jrue not playing right now because of injury, you have, or I think it's the COVID protocols, but you have Bryn Forbes and DJ Augustine, who are both very small guards. And then you have, Brook Lopez, he's a starting center, who's been a really good rim protector over the last few years, but he seems to have dropped off tremendously this year, and that's hurt them. Now, they should still be a solid defensive team just because of Giannis and Chris Middleton and Jrue Holiday, but they've struggled defensively, and that's been hurting them a lot. And they've had bad losses to teams like the Thunder earlier in the season. They lost to the Raptors, and I think they've lost 4 of their last 5. And yeah, they just looked really bad. So pretty disappointing things we've seen from Toronto or Milwaukee. They might still turn it around, but I think they got to get somewhat creative on offense. And on defense, I don't know. I think a guy like Torrey Craig could really use some minutes. We talked about this before, but he's a guy that, again, isn't the most elite defensive stopper, and he's not the most skilled or polished offensive player, but you need some hustle, you need some toughness, you need some size and versatility. I think Torrey Craig could give them that. We look at a team like the Nuggets, who lost to the Wizards on Wednesday. The Nuggets, man, it's such an up and down team, because in that Nuggets Wizards game, right, they finally got a good performance from both Jokic and Murray, and Michael Porter Jr. even dropped 14, and they got 14 from Campazzo, right? But JaMychal Green only gives them 9, Gary Harrison gives them 2, and you don't get much else, right? Zeke Naji gives them 3, and I do think he's been playing well, actually, but Hartenstein gives them 8, RJ Hampton gives them 3, but they don't get that much outside of the 3, really. But even then, they score 128, right? And their defense gives up 130 to Washington. Now, Washington obviously has Bradley Beal and an inefficient Russell Westbrook, but giving up 130 to the Wizards just isn't okay. And I don't know, man. Like, Denver was always a team that, kind of like Milwaukee, they weren't, Denver wasn't to that level of elite defense, but Denver was always a solid defensive team the last few years. And they, even with Jokic being a defensive liability at times, they were really good at just playing really well together. They had guys like Will Barton and Gary Harris who were very solid defenders. They ran teams off the 3-point line extremely well. And I think they do miss not Torrey Craig, but Torrey Craig they miss a little bit for the reasons I had mentioned earlier. But I do think they miss Jeremy Grant on defense, actually. I think the offensive things that they lost from Jeremy Grant, they can make up with guys like JaMychal Green, MPJ, and Campazzo. But the defense that Jeremy Grant gave them, because he hustles a lot, he's a guy that can get up and protect the rim. He's athletic and quick enough to guard multiple positions, and JaMychal Green can't do that. MPJ is a defensive liability still at times. So I do think they miss Jeremy Grant's defense a lot. And yeah, this team is just struggling defensively, and they're 15-13, which isn't awful, but with the way that Jokic has been playing, they should be better. They should have a better record. And Jamal Murray seems to be turning the corner, so that's important for them too. But MPJ, who's been, again, inconsistent since missing a lot of time, he's had a couple good games in a row now, so maybe he can turn it around. But this team's ultimately going to depend on their defense, because they're going to score most nights just enough points. But they gotta turn it up a notch defensively. And they're not a team like the Lakers where they can kind of just turn it on. I mean, they didn't win it all last year. Maybe they are coasting a bit in the regular season, but yeah, I mean, their defense is going to be the key, especially come playoff time. We look at Boston, who ended up losing a pretty bad game against the Hawks. I know they made it up and won against them last night, but Boston continued to be up and down. Jason Tatum didn't play too great in the Wednesday game against the Hawks. You had the Clippers and Jazz in a close game, but the Clippers on Wednesday weren't playing with their 2 guys. The Jazz continue to find ways to win games. The Heat lost to the Warriors. They continue to struggle. Damian Lillard just absolutely went off against the Pelicans, going off for 43 and 16. He just continues to impress, man. Nets Lakers was kind of a matchup everyone talked about from Thursday night. That wasn't too. I mean, the Nets didn't have KD and AD didn't have, or Lakers didn't have AD. So, one team's missing their best player and the other team's missing their second best player. The Nets still did pull out a nice win for them, but Harden and Kyrie look good. They do look good together, and like I said, Harden has really integrated himself well into that lineup. Sixers last night, Joel Embiid continues to dominate. Another guy who's in the MVP conversation. 50 points and 17 rebounds, I believe, and 5 assists. And that was a game where he looked dominant in every aspect, every facet of the game. Obviously, the 50 points, he was scoring at will. The rebounding, 17 rebounds. Defensively, he was everywhere. Did a really nice job protecting the rim. And then even 5 assists. And he talked about just doing whatever his team needs him to do. And we're finally seeing Joel Embiid at his peak. The guy we always wanted to see and guy we saw glimpses of in the past. But he's healthy and he's putting it together. He's consistent and he seems to be a lot more focused mentally this year. And I know in the past he's kind of put on a show and kind of troll guys and be a little bit of a clown at times. But this season he's focused, and it's great to see. And this is what Philadelphia went through, all the injuries and trusted the process for. And this is again a team that's going to be judged at the end of the day on what they do in the postseason. But Joel Embiid individually, this regular season has been just a different guy. He's on another level. Just been a monster, and good to see. We talked about the Bucks again, finally getting a win over OKC, getting back on the win column. But again, only a 13-point win over an OKC team that isn't very talented at home. Right? They should have won that by more. Raptors get a 5-point win in an 86-81 score, which is unheard of these days. I mean, that's a score from the 90s or 2000s. But the Raptors get a win. They continue to rise up in the Eastern Conference standings. Clippers get out, pull out a nice win against the Jazz, where Kawhi and PG both come back. PG struggled a bit, 16 or 15 points, but Kawhi Leonard played really well, 29 points. They got a big game out of Marcus Morris, Patrick Beverley, and Lou Williams, 17, 17, and 19 for those guys. And the Jazz struggled a little bit, They were able to corral Rudy Gobert. He held to 8 points. Donovan Mitchell played really well for 35, and Clarkson had 19, and Mike Conley had 16 coming back, but and Bogdanovich had 23 as well. But pretty good game. Could be a very possible playoff matchup, one that'd be really interesting to watch. But we take a look at what's coming up today and tomorrow for the weekend games. Warriors, Hornets, two teams that are battling for playoff positioning, could be interesting. Lakers, Heat, old rivalry. Not really a rivalry this year, or obviously these two teams played in the finals, but the Heat have fallen off and Lakers don't have AD, but still a matchup to possibly keep an eye on. Let's see, you have Suns, Grizzlies. Could be a decent game. Two teams again battling for Western Conference playoff positioning. Phoenix been playing really well. Chris Paul had a monster game yesterday with, I think, 19 assists, and he doesn't age. It's incredible what he's doing. And then tomorrow, Sixers, Raptors should be a good game. You have, let's see, Hawks, Nuggets. Might be interesting. That game might be super high scoring, man. That's a game where it could be in the 140s for sure. Bucks look to continue their win streak against the Kings. Clippers, Nets. That should be an interesting one. I don't think KD's playing yet, but still, Kyrie and James Harden could be enough to compete with Kawhi Leonard and PG. Celtics, Pelicans. Am I interested? Probably not really. Cavs, Thunder could be a really ugly game, and Magic, Pistons. Man, that's a pass. But yeah, you have some interesting games coming up this weekend. But yeah, it's just a recap of what I talked about. The All-Star game, my thoughts on that. Dame Lillard should be starting. Fan voting, kind of troll, but it is what it is. And Milwaukee struggling, Denver struggling. Both teams need to figure it out on defense. Joel Embiid, Damian Lillard, Chris Paul, very impressive, very impressive. But yeah, thanks for listening. I guess watching too if you're on YouTube. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. We will be taking tomorrow off, but we'll be back on Monday. And yeah, do follow us on social media. On Instagram, it is keep_a_hoop. On Twitter, it is keep_a_hoop_blog. If you were watching this on YouTube, please remember to like, subscribe, share, and comment. And yeah, we'll be back on Monday. Hope you guys have a nice weekend, and we will see you guys soon.